Native Americans, indigenous peoples of Reddit. What's it like to grow up on a reservation in the USA? I just wanted to give you kudos for an original question that actually seems very interesting. I grew up on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. It was fine, I guess. After moving off the reservation, I realized that everyone was poor, but my family just happened to be slightly less poor since both my parents worked a lot to try and give us a good life. It felt like a small town with a lot of culture that is very important. People flocked to powwows, rodeos, sporting events, and whatever was going on. If it wasn't that, then the older folks were drinking. I don't ever want to go back. There's just no opportunity there. I grew up on the Navajo Reservation in the Southwest, New Mexico to be specific, and spent a lot of time in Arizona as well. Some of the natural landscape can be truly amazing, but there is also all the isolation and typical issues that can be seen. Families that have to deal with drugs, alcohol, and crime. The size, distance, and location are all hard obstacles that add a lot of separation between services like jobs, healthcare, and even picking up day-to-day items. Cell service, internet access, and communication are all hit and miss in a lot of locations. You asked about reservations in the US, but I'll answer anyway. I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto, but my parents had roots in the north and we visited my grandma in a small northern community often. It's true that colonialism has left a legacy of addictions, abuse, and other serious issues, but there's lots of great stuff in our communities too. My fondest childhood memories are of grandma making bannock with bear fat and the blueberries we picked. Most indigenous people in Canada do not live on reserves. Many of us have never lived on reserves. I have raised my kids in the city, but we spend as much time as possible hunting, fishing, playing lacrosse, and other traditional pastimes. I don't live on a reservation, but I have family that do. It's the Tulalip Indian Reservation, north of Seattle. Alcohol is a huge problem, as is drunk driving. They sell fireworks around the 4th, though they go off all the time and there is no noise ordinance. The police and court system are a joke. Marijuana is legal in WA, but not on the res because it's federal land. They opened a casino resort and outlet mall several years ago. It brings in a lot of money. Poverty is a huge issue. The casino is really nice, really fancy, though I don't gamble. Our family goes to seafood night at the buffet. It's like $25 a person and all you can eat: crab, shrimp, mussels, salmon. My grandma lived by the beach. My cousins and I were always going down there when we were younger. She's in a nursing home now and they tore down her house and put up condos. So my tribe isn't federally recognized, only state recognized. However, I will still speak on it. I moved to my tribal area to obtain my master's degree and it's very different from the city I grew up in. I work in a little shop in town, and the amount of people who come in drugged out or drunk is staggering. There also seems to be a big divide between culture and religion. I live in the south, so there are a lot of churches here. The church natives don't agree with the culture that was established before Columbus made contact, and the spiritual people don't believe in church. I've heard nasty comments from both sides. However, it's one of the most loving communities you would ever know. I could be standing in line somewhere and within 5 minutes a stranger will have a complete conversation with you, pray for you, and tell you to have a good day. On top of all that, back home, strangers really didn't talk to anyone they didn't know. Edited to note, my tribe, the Lumbee, does not have a reservation. AWWIT.org. An AskReddit that directly relates to me. I grew up on a reservation in Minnesota. I left when I became an adult. Basically has the same stuff as rural towns. No good paying work. Lots of drug abuse. Except the benefit of a Superfund site next to the town. That's a huge chemical leak that no one can afford to clean up. It leads to a lot of cancers. My father died of a cancer associated with it. The good is there's a strong sense of family in the community. My fiance grew up there as well, but has a much bigger family. They are all there for each other and it's amazing what people can do in groups like that. The res culture is something I didn't even realize until I left. I said slang words no one understood and had an accent. Both me and my fiance have lost those accents. Don't tell her, but she gets it back if she drinks or is mad. I have never had to pay for healthcare, ever. Checkups, surgeries, meds, even emergency things, had to be life flighted once. No bill. I understand while people were made about ACA, but it didn't affect my life. I don't live on a reservation, because they were never able to relocate my people. My tribe's also not federally recognized. Funny coincidence that. My mom grew up on a res, so we spent a lot of time visiting relatives there. The roads do not get fixed. There's a lot of poverty, gov housing, unsolved murders, and addiction. Ilaska native Inupiaq here. Born and lived 8 years in Barrow, then 20 years in Fairbanks, now living in Anchorage. We don't have reservations, but we do have villages that are mainly native. The biggest difference is economic. We didn't have much money, weren't raised with money, and as a result have poor spending habits coupled with half-assed schooling by newbie bush teachers. Financial stability is something that we struggle with no matter if you're Inuit or Athabascan or Yupik. This of course can lead to everything else mentioned in this thread. Alcoholism, drugs, suicide, domestic violence, etc. You get the picture. It's getting better though. With each generation we're learning more. I am a member of the Tohono O'odham Nation. I visited the reservation frequently as a child while my grandmother was still alive. After she passed, my father wouldn't let us go there anymore. Unfortunately, the reservation was riddled with crime, tons of drugs abuse. My father was the only one of 5 kids to make it off the reservation. The other 4 died from drug overdose or alcohol abuse. His older brother quite literally drank himself to death. Aside from the crime, many members of the tribe have medical issues stemming from obesity like diabetes, heart disease, and fatty liver. Now that I'm nurse, I've considered going back to work on the reservation. My dad really does not want me to. Proof below. Tribal ID card. I have never lived on a reservation, but I do live in close proximity to many reservations, and I have worked in a counseling type environment with many kids from the reservation. My observations, again, from an outside non-native view, is that there is a lot of abuse of all kinds that runs rampant on reservations. A lot of it is so second nature that a lot of the kids I've worked with are surprised that physical abuse, alcoholism isn't a household norm. I don't say this as a point of criticism at all. I think a lot of kids whose eyes are open to the outside world in any capacity are often ostracized for wanting to get out and leave it behind. I think the Native American culture is really interesting, and there are many beautiful traditions within the different tribes' communities. The idea of confining a certain race of people to small areas of land was awful in the first place, so to me it's no surprise what it's done to the people over the course of the last 170 years, with natives being forced to adapt to white Christian cultures and being forced to assimilate or be treated even worse than they already were. I'm from a reservation in WA state and I'm half Native American. It's not that bad here. The thing is, all tribes are different. There is a lot of heroin and meth abuse. Generally, the dealers are not the native people, but a lot of the users are. My sisters are all addicts. Other than everyone having a bunch of broken down cars, lol, it's not much different than a small town. I start work as an attorney for my tribe, as in-house counsel, next week. The tribe has paid for everything for me. They fully funded my undergrad at a top private university, and they funded my law degree. They pay for my healthcare. They pay for each kid to have school clothes twice a year, 300 twice a year. They have their own food bank and resource center, a gym with personal trainers. You get the gist. Edit. It's my auntie's birthday, so I gotta go to a dinner, but I'll be back to answer questions later. Second edit. Okay. Not that bad is relative. I mean, you read about terrible places with dogs running loose and this Gary, Indiana image, and I meant it's not all like that. Yes, there are a lot of bad things, and even in my life I've experienced more tragedy than most people do. But I love my tribe and my people, and to me, it's just a part of life. There's a reason non-natives are dealers on reservations. Jurisdiction. On the res, the non-tribal folks only have to worry about the feds, as the county and state police leave the policing to the tribal police, who don't have jurisdiction over non-tribal folks. Yeah, I've done a lot of studying on the complex jurisdictional issues that Indian country faces. It ducking sucks. My niece was murdered by her father when we were both teens. He was never charged. Why? Because the feds have jurisdiction and neither the buyer police nor the FBI are really in the business of prosecuting small time murders on reservations. Another girl was murdered a few years later by her boyfriend. Again, unprosecuted. The 2010 Tribal Law and Order Act says that feds have to now cite their reasoning when declining to prosecute, but most of the time they say lack of evidence even when there's a smoking gun. I currently live in a pretty isolated reserve way up in northern Canada, so I'm sorry that I'm not quite who you were asking. The living conditions are pretty awful. The trailers' houses are very run down and often just plain dirty. People get animals they can't afford and allow them to reproduce to a point where we probably have more dogs than people. The res dogs are the worst BC, they are violent and not cared for. We have no animal control, so people don't care and let their animals run free. Many of the people here are either on drugs, alcoholics, or had too many kids to afford to leave. Most of the people here have never graduated high school. Most only make it to grade 10. Imagine all the stereotypes you hear about my race and you'll get a pretty good idea. Not all the reserves are ugly and run down. I've been to a few that are very nice and where the houses are actually suitable for living. The people have their issues, but they aren't bad people. We were all raised on this idea that what we label we were, druggies, alcoholics etc., is all we can ever be. I thought it was normal to have children in your teen years because that's all I was exposed to. I like to think that there is hope for my home to restore the sense of community and clean this place up. But there's a reason all the people who were able to leave never came back. I tried to do what little I could by tutoring students for free while I tried to balance school and work, but it wasn't really enough. I graduated high school this year, and I am leaving for university at a school a good 24 hours drive away from home, and I'm not sure that I want to come back. Sorry for my answer being blunt, but it's the truth for my reserve. I hope this isn't true for any others.